The scream cut through the afternoon air like a knife. One moment, Willow Warren was standing on the boardwalk in her finest blue calico dress. The next, she was tumbling through empty space, her dress billowing around her, before she crashed face first into thick, disgusting mud below. San Pedro, California, 1876. A port town where the rich made the rules and everyone else learned to obey. "That'll teach you to refuse a dance, Miss High and Mighty," sneered Clancy Dobbs from above, his laughter echoing across the busy street. Willow struggled in the muck, mud caking her carefully pinned hair, ruining the dress she'd spent 3 months' savings on. Her fingers sank deeper with each attempt to stand. Onlookers gasped but kept their distance. Nobody crossed the Dobbs family, not if they wanted to keep their jobs, their homes, or their dignity. But then a voice came from above her. "Need a hand, ma'am?" Before Willow could respond, a tall stranger jumped down from the boardwalk, his fine leather boots sinking ankle-deep in filth without hesitation. Strong hands grasped her elbows and lifted her like she weighed nothing. "Easy now," he murmured. Through mud-streaked lashes, Willow saw her rescuer clearly for the first time. Tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing blue eyes beneath a dark hat. A cowboy by the look of him. Trail-worn but not destitute. "You all right, miss?" Before she could answer, Clancy's mocking voice cut through again. "Don't waste your time with that one, stranger. School teachers ought to know their place." The cowboy's expression hardened. He helped Willow steady herself, then turned to face Clancy with deadly calm. "Where I come from, men don't push ladies. Any particular reason you felt the need to do so today?" Clancy's face reddened. "Mind your business, cowpoke." "Matthew Atwood," the cowboy said, stepping forward with purposeful strides. "And I'm making it my business." Clancy's hand twitched toward his waistcoat, but Matthew was already there, his movements so fast, Willow barely saw it happen. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Clancy's wrist in a vice grip. "I wouldn't," Matthew said calmly. "Now I believe you owe the lady an apology." "Do you know who my father is?" Clancy sputtered. "Don't much care. I know who you are now, a man who pushes women into mud. That tells me everything." The entire street had gone silent. Even the saloon piano stopped. Finally, Clancy yanked his hand free and stalked away, shooting venomous glances at spectators who quickly pretended they'd seen nothing. Matthew turned back to Willow, his stern expression softening. "Let me help you somewhere you can get cleaned up." "I'm Willow Warren, the school teacher." She looked down at her ruined clothing. "But I can't possibly walk through town like this." Without warning, Matthew shrugged off his long duster coat and held it out. "If you wouldn't mind." As they walked to her home, Willow became acutely aware of the whispers following them. San Pedro was small, with a big appetite for gossip. By morning, everyone would be talking. "You're new to San Pedro," she said. "Not a question." "Just rode in this morning. Got business with cattle buyers at the harbor." "You've made an enemy before sundown," Willow said quietly. "The Dobbs family owns half this town." Matthew's smile was slight, but genuine. "Wouldn't be the first time I've started trouble before unpacking my saddlebags." Despite everything, Willow found herself returning his smile. They reached her small clapboard house near the schoolhouse. She stopped at the gate. "Thank you again. I can manage from here." Matthew tipped his hat. "Glad to help, ma'am." He hesitated. "If you don't mind my asking, why did Dobbs push you?" "I refused his offer to escort me to the Founders' Day dance next Saturday. It's not the first time, but certainly the most dramatic rejection he's received. Man doesn't take no for an answer." "Men like Clancy Dobbs aren't accustomed to hearing it," Willow replied, bitterness in her voice. "Well, Miss Warren, I expect I'll see you around town. Mr. Atwood, your coat. He glanced back with a smile. Keep it for now. I'll collect it another time. As she watched him walk away, Willow felt a strange flutter in her chest. Inside her home, as she peeled off mud-soaked clothing, she couldn't help wondering about the cowboy who'd risked crossing the Dobbs family for a stranger. She hung his coat carefully after brushing off the mud. It smelled of leather, horses, and something indefinably masculine, like open prairie and freedom. For some reason, that scent made her feel safe. But Willow had no idea this chance encounter would destroy her carefully ordered life in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, Willow felt the weight of eyes everywhere. "Morning, Miss Warren," called Mrs. Peterson from the general store, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Heard you had quite the adventure yesterday." "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson. Nothing too adventurous, I assure you." "And that cowboy who helped you, quite handsome, isn't he? Stopped by this morning for supplies, polite as can be." Willow's heart quickened. "I'm grateful for his assistance." Mrs. Peterson's expression turned serious. "Well, you be careful, dear. Clancy Dobbs was in here earlier, looking like thunder. His father's none too pleased either." Willow's stomach tightened. Gerald Dobbs owned the largest shipping company in San Pedro. He wielded considerable influence, including over the school board that employed her. The school day passed without incident, though Willow's thoughts drifted to Matthew more than was proper. She had just dismissed her students when a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up with a welcoming smile that faltered. Gerald Dobbs himself stood there, his substantial frame filling the entrance. Steel gray hair, cold eyes. The hard look of a man who'd built his fortune through tenacity and ruthlessness. "Mr. Dobbs, this is an unexpected visit." "Miss Warren," he replied, voice deceptively pleasant. "I understand there was an unfortunate incident involving my son yesterday." Willow chose her words carefully. "There was a misunderstanding, yes. A misunderstanding that resulted in my son being publicly humiliated by some drifter." Dobbs stepped into the classroom. "And you were at the center of it." "Your son pushed me off the boardwalk, Mr. Dobbs. The drifter, as you call him, merely helped me up and suggested Clancy apologize." Dobbs's eyebrows rose. "Is that how you remember it? Because from what I hear, you've been encouraging my son's attentions only to rebuff him publicly." "That is absolutely untrue," Willow said, anger flaring. "I have politely declined his invitations multiple times." "A woman in your position should be grateful for such attention," Dobbs said, tone hardening. "School teachers come and go in San Pedro, Miss Warren. Your contract renewal comes before the board next month, as I'm sure you're aware." The threat was unmistakable. "Are you suggesting my employment depends on accepting your son's advances?" "I'm suggesting that those who make enemies in this town rarely prosper, and that includes wandering cowboys who don't know their place." Before Willow could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. "Afternoon, folks. Hope I'm not interrupting." Matthew Atwood stood in the doorway, hat in hand, expression pleasant but eyes alert. He'd cleaned up, freshly shaved, clean clothes. "Mr. Atwood," Willow said, relief washing over her. "Miss Warren." He nodded politely before turning to Dobbs. "And you must be Mr. Dobbs. Your reputation precedes you, sir." Dobbs regarded Matthew with undisguised contempt. "As does yours, apparently. I understand you manhandled my son yesterday." "I simply encouraged him to apologize for pushing Miss Warren into the mud," Matthew replied easily. "Where I come from, that's called manners." "Where you come from is of no interest to me," Dobbs snapped. "What matters is you're interfering in affairs that don't concern you. When a lady is pushed into the mud, it concerns any decent man in the vicinity." Dobbs's face darkened. You do well to remember that San Pedro isn't friendly to troublemakers, Cowboy. I suggest you conclude whatever business brought you here and move on. Appreciate the advice, Matthew said with a slight smile. But I find I'm liking the view in San Pedro. Might stay a while. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling. Finally, Dobbs turned back to Willow. Remember what I said, Miss Warren. Good day. With a final glare at Matthew, he departed. When he was gone, Willow released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was tense. Man doesn't like being challenged, Matthew observed. I've met his type before. He all but threatened my position. Matthew frowned. Because you wouldn't encourage his son's attentions. Partly that, partly because of your intervention yesterday. She looked up at him. You shouldn't have made an enemy of Gerald Dobbs. He wasn't exaggerating his influence. I've faced worse, Matthew said simply. Then, changing the subject, I came to retrieve my coat and check that you were all right. Your coat is at my home. I washed it as best I could. No rush. And my second question? I'm fine, she said automatically. Then amended, well, embarrassed and apparently on Gerald Dobbs's list of problems to solve, but otherwise unharmed. I didn't mean to complicate things for you. You didn't, Willow said firmly. Clancy Dobbs did that all on his own. A smile touched Matthew's lips. You're quite direct for a school teacher, Miss Warren. And you're quite chivalrous for a cowboy, Mr. Atwood. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her cheeks warmed. His smile widened. I've been called many things, but chivalrous is a new one. He settled his hat back on his head. May I walk you home, Miss Warren, to collect my coat? Willow knew she should refuse. A single woman walking with an unmarried man would fuel more gossip. But something about Matthew made her want to break her own careful rules. I would appreciate the company. As they walked through town together, Willow was acutely aware of stares and whispers. Matthew seemed either oblivious or unconcerned. How long have you been teaching in San Pedro? Just over a year. I came from Boston after my parents passed. That's quite a journey to make alone. It was time for a fresh start. Teaching positions for women are more plentiful out west. She glanced at him. What brings you to California? Originally from Montana Territory. Been working cattle drives, then took on a job bringing a herd west for a buyer here. And after that, Matthew shrugged. Hadn't thought that far ahead, though I'm starting to think San Pedro might be worth exploring a bit more thoroughly. The way he looked at her made it clear he wasn't talking about the town itself. They reached her home. Propriety dictated she retrieve his coat and bid him goodbye at the door. Instead, she heard herself say, Would you like some coffee, Mr. Atwood? His eyes crinkled. I'd be obliged, Miss Warren. Inside, Willow busied herself with the coffee pot, suddenly nervous. What was she thinking? Inviting a man she barely knew into her home? If the school board heard about it. Nice place you've got here, Matthew commented, remaining respectfully near the door. Reminds me of my aunt's house back in Helena. It's modest, but it suits me. She gestured to a chair. Please sit. The coffee will be ready shortly. As she prepared the coffee, Willow stole glances at Matthew. Details she'd missed before. A thin scar along his jawline, the way his dark hair curled at the nape of his neck, crow's feet that spoke of years squinting against the sun. Your coat is hanging by the door. I hope I got most of the mud out. Thank you. He made no move to retrieve it. Been meaning to ask, what do you teach, Miss Warren? Everything, she laughed. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography. It's a small school, just one room for all ages. Sounds challenging. It is, but rewarding. She placed coffee before him. The children here are eager to learn. Many will have opportunities their parents never did. You care about them. Of course, education is the key to a better future. It's what my parents believed, and what I believe. And is teaching your future here in San Pedro? He asked. Despite men like Dobbs? Willow considered the question. I don't know anymore. I love teaching, but if Mr. Dobbs convinces the school board not to renew my contract, what would you do then? Move on, I suppose. Find another town in need of a teacher. She sighed. It wouldn't be the first time I've had to start over. Matthew studied her thoughtfully. You're a brave woman, Miss Warren. Willow blinked in surprise. Brave? I don't think anyone's ever described me that way. Traveling alone across the country, building a new life, standing up to men like Clancy Dobbs, takes courage. His words warmed her more than the coffee. Thank you, Mr. Atwood, though I could say the same about a man who confronts the town's most powerful family on his first day. Matthew laughed, a rich sound that filled the small kitchen. That wasn't bravery, Miss Warren. That was just good manners, and maybe a touch of poor judgment. They talked until the coffee grew cold, discovering shared interests in books and music. Matthew had been educated beyond what most would expect of a cowboy. He'd attended school in Helena until he was 16. Willow found herself relaxing, laughing more than she had in months. When light began to fade, Matthew finally stood. I should go. Thank you for the coffee and conversation. Willow, she said impulsively. My friends call me Willow. He smiled. Willow. And I'm Matthew to my friends. At the door, he took his coat from the hook. Might I call on you again, Willow? The proper answer would be no. She had a reputation to consider, her position in the community. But looking up into his blue eyes, Willow found she didn't want to be proper. I would like that, Matthew. He tipped his hat and stepped into the gathering dusk. Willow watched him walk away, a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension swirling within her. She had no illusions. Getting involved with Matthew Atwood would only deepen her troubles with the Dobbs family. Yet as she closed her door, she couldn't bring herself to regret the invitation. For the first time since arriving in San Pedro, Willow felt as though she'd found someone who saw her not as the proper Boston school teacher, not as a potential wife to be courted, but as herself. It was a dangerous feeling, but one she wasn't ready to relinquish just yet. The next few days passed in a blur. Matthew kept his word and called on her again, first bringing a book he thought she'd enjoy, then offering to fix a loose shutter on her home. Each visit was conducted with perfect propriety, usually in the afternoon, when neighbors could see nothing untoward was happening. Yet despite this caution, Willow could feel the town's opinion shifting against her. Mrs. Peterson, usually so friendly, now offered only curt nods. Parents who normally stayed to chat after school now hurried their children away. And Clancy Dobbs had taken to lounging across the street from the schoolhouse, watching her with a calculating expression that made her skin crawl. On Friday afternoon, a week after the Boardwalk incident, Reverend Thomas visited her classroom after the children had left. Miss Warren, I wonder if I might have a word. Of course, Reverend. Is something wrong? The minister cleared his throat uncomfortably. It has come to my attention, and that of several prominent congregation members, that you have been entertaining a gentleman caller, a Mr. Atwood, I believe. Willow felt her cheeks flush. Mr. Atwood has called on me, yes, always in the afternoon, always with the utmost propriety. I'm sure, Reverend Thomas said, though his tone suggested otherwise. However, as a teacher in this community, you must understand you are held to a higher standard. Your behavior sets an example for the children. And what behavior would that be, Reverend? Accepting assistance when I was pushed into the mud, offering him coffee as thanks. The minister's expression hardened. There is talk, Miss Warren. Talk that you have rejected the attentions of a respectable local man in favor of a drifter with no ties to our community. By respectable local man, I assume you mean Clancy Dobbs, the man who pushed me off the boardwalk. Young Dobbs may have acted impulsively, but his family has been the backbone of this community for 20 years. The school board meets next week to discuss your contract, and several members have expressed concerns about your judgment. The threat was clear. Am I to understand my employment is contingent upon my personal relationships meeting with the approval of the Dobbs family? I wouldn't put it so bluntly, but as a woman alone, you must be mindful of appearances. Perhaps it would be wise to reconsider Clancy's invitation to the Founders' Day dance tomorrow night. It would go a long way towards smoothing things over. Willow stood, hands trembling with anger. Thank you for your concern, Reverend. I'll give it all due consideration. Recognizing the dismissal, the minister nodded stiffly. I hope you make the right choice, Miss Warren. Good day. After he left, Willow sank back into her chair, fighting tears of frustration. This was exactly why she'd been so careful, maintaining a spotless reputation, keeping to herself, avoiding entanglements. One moment of vulnerability, one man's act of kindness, and suddenly her livelihood was threatened. She was still sitting there when a knock came at the door. Matthew stood in the doorway, concern etched on his features. Bad time? No, Willow sighed. Just the usual reminder that a woman's position in society is precarious at best. Matthew stepped inside. The Reverend left looking mighty pleased with himself. I take it he was here about me. About us, Willow confirmed. Apparently my association with you is causing concern among the school board. Matthew's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. I never meant to cause trouble. It's not your fault. It's this town. The Dobbs family owns everything and everyone, and heaven help anyone who doesn't fall in line. What will you do? Willow laughed bitterly. According to the Reverend, I should accept Clancy's invitation to the Founders' Day dance and smooth things over. Matthew's expression darkened. After what he did to you, he cut himself off, visibly restraining his anger. What do you want to do? The question caught Willow off guard. No one had asked what she wanted in a very long time. I want, she began, then faltered. I need this position, Matthew. Teaching is all I have. He nodded. Then maybe it's best if I don't call on you anymore. The thought made her heart sink, but Willow knew he was right. Perhaps that would be wise. They stood in silence, the distance between them seeming to grow. I should go, Matthew said finally. I just wanted to tell you. I'll be leaving San Pedro soon. My business here is almost concluded. Oh. Willow tried to hide her disappointment. When? After the cattle sale on Monday, heading back north after that. Another silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. Well, Willow said, forcing brightness. I wish you safe travels, Mr. Atwood. Thank you, Miss Warren. His eyes never left hers. It's been a pleasure knowing you. He turned to leave, and Willow felt as though something precious was slipping through her fingers. Matthew, she called after him. He paused in the doorway, looking back. The Founders' Day dance, she said impulsively. Would you, I don't suppose... A slow smile spread across his face. Are you asking me to escort you to the dance, Miss Warren? Yes, Willow said, heart racing. Yes, I believe I am. What about your position? The school board? Willow straightened her shoulders. If my employment depends on accepting the advances of a man who pushed me into the mud, perhaps I need to reconsider my options. Matthew's smile widened. Then I would be honored to escort you, Willow. As he left, Willow wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the best decision she'd ever made. Either way, She knew tomorrow night would change everything. But Willow had no idea just how catastrophically right she was. The following evening, Willow stood before her small mirror, nervously adjusting her simple ivory dress. Not fancy by San Pedro standards, certainly not compared to what the Dobbs ladies would wear, but her best, with delicate lace at collar and cuffs. She'd arranged her hair elaborately, pinning it with her mother's pearl hairpins. Looking at her reflection, Willow hardly recognized herself. Gone was the prim school teacher. In her place stood someone with flushed cheeks and bright eyes. A knock sent her heart racing. Matthew stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking more polished than she'd ever seen him. He'd traded trail clothes for a dark suit that, while not new, was well tailored to his broad shoulders. Fresh shave, neatly combed hair. "Miss Warren," he said, eyes warming. "You look beautiful." "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Atwood." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" As they walked toward the town hall, Willow felt the eyes of the town upon them. Neighbors peered from windows. Passers-by offered stilted greetings, or none at all. By attending with Matthew, she was making a statement, one impossible for the Dobbs family to ignore. The town hall was decorated with bunting and lanterns, transformed for the annual celebration. A small band played in the corner. Tables laden with food and punch lined one wall. Nearly everyone in town was there. Their entrance caused a noticeable lull in conversation. Heads turned to stare. Willow spotted Clancy immediately, standing with his parents near the punch table, face darkening when he saw them. "Perhaps this wasn't such a good idea," Willow murmured, confidence wavering. "We can leave if you want," Matthew said quietly. "But I'd hate for you to miss the dance because of them." Willow straightened her spine. "No, you're right. I have as much right to be here as anyone." He smiled down at her. "That's the spirit." The music started. Matthew extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" Despite his rugged appearance, Matthew proved an excellent dancer, guiding her smoothly through the waltz. As they moved together, Willow gradually became less aware of the stares and whispers. "Where did a cowboy learn to dance like this?" she asked. Matthew chuckled. "My mother insisted, said no son of hers would embarrass himself at social gatherings." "She taught you well." "She'd like you," he replied, eyes softening. "Strong-willed, intelligent women always got along with my mother." The comment warmed Willow more than it should have. "And where is your mother now?" "Passed on 5 years ago. My father followed a year later." "I'm sorry." "They had a good life together. 40 years. That's more than most get." The dance ended. Matthew escorted Willow to the refreshment table. They'd just been served when Gerald Dobbs approached, wife and son in tow. "Miss Warren," Dobbs said coldly, "I see you decided to attend after all, though not with the escort we discussed." "Mr. Dobbs, Mrs. Dobbs, Clancy." Clancy sneered at Matthew. "Still hanging around, cowboy? Thought you'd have moved on by now." "Not just yet," Matthew replied evenly. "San Pedro has its charms." "Indeed," Gerald said, gaze flicking between Matthew and Willow. "Though I understand you'll be leaving soon. After the cattle sale on Monday, was it?" Willow stiffened. Dobbs had been keeping tabs on Matthew's business. "That's right," Matthew confirmed, seemingly unfazed. "Unless I find a compelling reason to stay." The way he glanced at Willow made her cheeks flush. Mrs. Dobbs made a small sound of disapproval. "Miss Warren, might I have a word in private?" Before Willow could respond, the older woman had taken her arm, steering her toward a quiet corner. Once they were out of earshot, Mrs. Dobbs turned to her, expression stern but not unkind. "My dear, you are making a grave mistake. This dalliance with the cowboy may seem romantic now, but consider your future, your position, your reputation. Mrs. Dobbs, I appreciate your concern, but— No, you listen to me, the older woman interrupted. I've lived in San Pedro for 30 years. I know how quickly a woman's reputation can be destroyed. You're playing a dangerous game, rejecting my son's attentions for a man who will be gone by Tuesday. Willow bristled. With all due respect, your son pushed me off a boardwalk into the mud. That's not the behavior of a gentleman I'd wish to encourage. Clancy can be impetuous, but he comes from good family, has prospects, stability. What does your cowboy offer besides momentary excitement? The question struck harder than Willow expected, partly because she'd asked herself the same thing. What was she doing? Matthew would be gone in days, while she'd have to live with the consequences of tonight's choices. I should get back to my escort. Mrs. Dobbs sighed. Think about what I've said, dear. It's not too late to salvage your position here. Across the room, Matthew and the Dobbs men appeared to be having an equally tense conversation. As Willow approached, she heard Clancy saying, "Should know your place, cowboy. San Pedro isn't for your kind." "And what kind would that be?" Matthew asked mildly. "Drifters," Gerald Dobbs answered for his son. "Men with no roots, no responsibilities. Men who charm innocent women and leave them to face the consequences alone." Matthew's eyes hardened. "You don't know the first thing about me, Mr. Dobbs. I know your type, and I know what's best for this town." Willow reached Matthew's side, touching his arm lightly. "I believe the next dance is starting." Matthew looked down at her, expression softening immediately. "So it is." As he led her back to the dance floor, Willow could feel the Dobbs family's collective glare boring into her back. They danced several more numbers, gradually relaxing as the night wore on. Other couples even began engaging them in conversation, those citizens of San Pedro not directly dependent on the Dobbs family's good graces. Willow began to hope the evening would end without further incident. It was nearing 10 when Matthew suggested they step outside for air. The night was pleasantly cool. They walked to a bench beneath one of the large oak trees lining the town square. "You're quite popular with your students," Matthew observed. That young girl, Lucy, could hardly contain her excitement at seeing her teacher at the dance. Willow smiled. "Lucy's a dear, brightest student in my class. You care about them all, don't you? Every child deserves an education, and every child has something to offer if you take the time to look." Matthew studied her in the moonlight. "You're a remarkable woman, Willow Warren." His words sent a pleasant shiver through her. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. More surprising still, she realized she wanted him to. Instead, Matthew cleared his throat. "We should probably return before your reputation suffers further damage." The reminder dampened Willow's spirits, but she nodded. As they stood, Matthew hesitated. "Willow, about what Dobbs said earlier, about me leaving. It's all right. I've always understood you'd be moving on." "What if I wasn't?" he asked unexpectedly. Willow stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about settling down, finding a place to put down roots." Willow's heart began to race. "Here, in San Pedro?" "It has its appeal," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "Though I'd need a good reason to stay." The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Before Willow could formulate a response, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted. Turning, she saw Clancy Dobbs walking toward them, gait unsteady, a bottle dangling from his hand. "Well, well," Clancy slurred, stopping a few feet away. The school marm and her pet cowboy, sneaking off in the dark. What would the school board say about that, I wonder? Matthew stepped slightly in front of Willow. "You've had too much to drink, Dobbs. Go back inside." Clancy laughed harshly. Protecting her virtue, Bit late for that, isn't it? That's enough, Matthew said, voice dangerously quiet. Apologize to the lady. Lady, Clancy spat. She's nothing but a... He never finished the sentence. Matthew moved so quickly, Willow barely saw it. One moment Clancy was standing. The next he was sprawled on the ground, Matthew standing over him with fists clenched. Get up, Matthew said flatly, and choose your next words very carefully. Clancy struggled to his feet, face contorted with rage. You'll regret that, Cowboy. He reached inside his jacket. Willow's warning cry came too late. Moonlight glinted off metal as Clancy pulled a small pistol from his coat. Matthew tensed but didn't back down. Put that away before you hurt yourself, Dobbs. You think I won't use it? Clancy's hand was shaking. You've been a thorn in my side since you rode into town. Mr. Dobbs, please, Willow pleaded, stepping forward despite Matthew's attempt to keep her behind him. This is madness. Put the gun down. Stay out of this, Clancy snapped, but his eyes flickered to her, aim wavering. It was all the opening Matthew needed. In one fluid movement, he closed the distance, knocking the gun upward as it discharged into the night sky. The shot echoed across the square. Shouts came from the town hall as people poured outside. Matthew wrestled Clancy to the ground, disarming him with practiced ease. By the time Gerald Dobbs pushed through the crowd, his son was pinned beneath Matthew's knee, the pistol safely in Matthew's possession. What is the meaning of this? Gerald demanded. Your son pulled a gun on us, Matthew said calmly, rising but keeping a wary eye on Clancy. Fortunately, no one was hurt. He attacked me, Clancy protested, scrambling up. I was defending myself. That's a lie, Willow said firmly, stepping forward. Clancy approached us clearly intoxicated and made inappropriate remarks. When Mr. Atwood objected, Clancy drew his weapon. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Sheriff Taylor pushed forward, looking grim. Is that true, Miss Warren? You'd swear to it. I would. She's lying to protect him, Clancy shouted. Everyone knows they've been carrying on together. The accusation brought fresh whispers. Willow felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. That's enough, son, Gerald said sharply, gripping Clancy's arm. He turned to the sheriff. This is all a misunderstanding. My son has had too much to drink, that's all. I'll take him home now. Sheriff Taylor looked uncertain, glancing between Clancy and Matthew. There was a shot fired, Mr. Dobbs. That's a serious matter. An accidental discharge, Gerald said dismissively. No harm done. I'll take full responsibility. The sheriff hesitated, clearly reluctant to challenge the town's most powerful citizen. Finally, he nodded. See that he stays home for the remainder of the weekend, and I'll be keeping that pistol. As Gerald led his protesting son away, the crowd began to disperse. Soon only Matthew, Willow, and the sheriff remained. You all right, Miss Warren? Sheriff Taylor asked. Yes, thank you, Sheriff. The sheriff turned to Matthew. You handled yourself well, Atwood. Not many men could have disarmed a drunk without bloodshed. Not my first encounter with a man who can't hold his liquor. Sheriff Taylor nodded thoughtfully. Well, I suggest you both head home. It's been excitement enough for one night. With the tip of his hat, he departed, leaving them alone in the moonlit square. I should take you home, Matthew said quietly. The walk back was silent, both processing what had happened. At her door, Willow turned to face him. I'm sorry about tonight. I never meant to put you in danger. You didn't. Clancy Dobbs made his own choices. Still, if I hadn't asked you to the dance... I'm glad you did, Matthew interrupted. Despite everything, this has been one of the best evenings I've had in a long time. Willow couldn't help but smile. Even with a gun being pulled on you. Adds a certain excitement, don't you think? His attempt at humor fell flat as he saw the worry in her eyes. "Willow, what's wrong?" "Everything. After tonight, I don't think there's any saving my position at the school. The Dobbs family won't rest until I'm gone, and the things Clancy said about us. We could set the record straight. I could speak to the school board." Willow shook her head. "It wouldn't matter. In their eyes, I've chosen sides against the most influential family in town. My reputation is already compromised." They stood in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down. "What will you do?" Matthew finally asked. Willow sighed. "What I've always done. Move on, find another town, another school. And if there was another option." Matthew's voice was hesitant, unlike his usual confidence. "What other option could there be?" Matthew took a deep breath. "Come with me." The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and transformative. Willow stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Come with me when I leave. I meant what I said earlier about settling down. I've been thinking about it for a while. Buying land, raising horses instead of driving cattle, building something permanent." "Matthew, Willow stammered. "We barely know each other." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're brave and kind. I know you stand up for what's right, even when it costs you. I know I've never met anyone like you, Willow Warren." Her heart was racing. "Where would we go?" "North. I've had my eye on land in Oregon Territory. Beautiful country, growing fast. They need teachers there too." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and tantalizing. To leave everything behind, to start anew with this man she'd known barely a week. "I don't expect an answer tonight," Matthew said gently. "Just think about it. I'll be at the cattle auction Monday morning. If you decide to come with me, meet me at the livery stable at noon." Before Willow could respond, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. "Good night, Willow." Then he turned and walked away into the darkness. Willow stood on her porch long after he'd gone, mind whirling with possibilities. Go with him. Leave everything she'd built. Start again in unfamiliar territory with a man she was only beginning to know? It was madness. And yet, as she finally went inside, Willow couldn't deny the small spark of hope that had ignited at Matthew's words. For the first time since arriving in San Pedro, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one not defined by the constraints of a small town's expectations or the whims of men like Gerald Dobbs. Whether that future included Matthew Atwood remained to be seen. But the mere possibility kept Willow awake long into the night. And what she didn't know yet was that by morning, that decision would be made for her in the most devastating way possible. Sunday dawned bright and clear, but Willow hardly noticed. Her mind was still reeling from Matthew's proposal. "Come with me." 3 simple words that could change everything. She attended church as usual, though she arrived late and sat in the back, avoiding the curious stares and whispers. Reverend Thomas's sermon on moral fortitude seemed particularly pointed, but Willow kept her expression neutral. After the service, she slipped out before anyone could corner her, hurrying home to the solitude of her small house. There she paced restlessly, weighing her options, making lists of pros and cons that did nothing to clarify her swirling emotions. A knock at her door in the late afternoon startled her. Half hoping, half fearing it might be Matthew, Willow smoothed her skirts and went to answer. Instead, she found Mrs. Peterson standing on her porch, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Peterson, is everything all right?" "May I come in, Miss Warren?" The older woman glanced over her shoulder as if concerned about being seen. Puzzled, Willow stepped aside. "Of course." Once inside, Mrs. Peterson wasted no time. "I've just come from a meeting of the school board, an emergency session called by Gerald Dobbs." Willow's stomach sank. "I see. They voted to terminate your contract effective immediately. Dobbs claimed you've shown moral turpitude unbefitting an educator of youth. Despite having anticipated this outcome, the news still stung. I see. It's not right, Mrs. Peterson said firmly. Half the board knows it too, but none dared stand against Dobbs. My Albert tried, but he was outvoted. Willow managed a small smile. Thank you for telling me. Mrs. Peterson hesitated. There's more. Dobbs has instructed Sheriff Taylor to investigate the incident at the dance last night. He's claiming that cowboy of yours assaulted Clancy without provocation. That's absurd. Clancy pulled a gun on us. I believe you, but with the Dobbs family's influence. She let the implication hang. When will the sheriff want to speak with me? Tomorrow morning. I thought you should know before they came knocking. Mrs. Peterson reached out to pat Willow's hand. For what it's worth, child, I think you're better off leaving San Pedro. This town doesn't deserve you. After Mrs. Peterson left, Willow sat motionless, absorbing the news. She'd lost her position, her livelihood, her purpose. And now Matthew might be in legal trouble because of her. The decision that had seemed so difficult that morning suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity. There was nothing left for her in San Pedro, nothing but humiliation and the vindictive pursuit of the Dobbs family. Moving with new purpose, Willow began to pack. She wouldn't wait until Monday. She needed to find Matthew tonight, warn him about the sheriff's investigation, and tell him that yes, she would go with him. The sun was setting as Willow finished packing her most essential belongings into 2 small trunks. She couldn't take much, just clothes, a few books, her mother's jewelry, personal mementos. She was just latching the second trunk when another knock came. This time the visitor was Sheriff Taylor himself. Evening, Miss Warren. May I come in? Willow stepped aside wordlessly, heart pounding. The sheriff's eyes fell on her packed trunks. His eyebrows rose. Going somewhere? I've been terminated from my position. There's no reason for me to stay. Sheriff Taylor nodded, unsurprised. I heard about the school board's decision. Came by to tell you I've been asked to look into last night's incident. He glanced again at her trunks. But it seems you're already planning to leave town. Is that a problem? The sheriff was silent for a moment, studying her. Finally, he sighed. Miss Warren, I've been sheriff in this town for 15 years, seen a lot of people come and go. Some leave footprints, others don't leave a trace. He gestured to her trunks. Looks to me like you're planning to leave before sunrise. It wasn't a question, but Willow nodded anyway. I thought it would be best. And Atwood, he planning a hasty departure too? I don't know. I haven't spoken to him since last night. Sheriff Taylor rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Gerald Dobbs is a powerful man in San Pedro, but he doesn't own the law. Not yet, anyway. He settled his hat back on his head. I'll be at the cattle auction tomorrow morning. Probably won't have time to start any investigations until the afternoon. Say around 2 o'clock. His pointed look made his meaning clear. Relief washed over Willow. I understand, Sheriff. Good. Oh, and Miss Warren, for what it's worth, I think you were good for this town. Shame not everyone sees it that way. After the sheriff left, Willow moved quickly. She couldn't wait until morning. She needed to find Matthew tonight. Donning her cloak, she slipped out and made her way toward the modest hotel in the center of town. The hotel clerk, a young man named Eddie, who had a sister in Willow's class, looked up in surprise. Miss Warren, can I help you? I'm looking for Mr. Atwood. Is he staying here? Eddie nodded. Room 204, but he's not in at the moment. Said he was going to the livery to check on his horse. Thank you. The livery stable was on the outskirts of town, a fair walk from the hotel. As Willow hurried through darkening streets, she kept a wary eye out for any sign of the Dobbs family or their associates. The stable was quiet when she arrived, just a single lantern burning inside. Willow hesitated at the entrance, suddenly unsure. What if Matthew wasn't here? What if he'd already heard about the investigation and left town? "Hello," she called softly, stepping inside. "Matthew?" A rustling sound came from one of the stalls, and a moment later, Matthew emerged, surprise evident on his face. "Willow, what are you doing here?" The sight of him sent a wave of relief through her. "I needed to find you. There's trouble." Quickly, she explained about the school board's decision and the sheriff's intended investigation. Matthew listened gravely, expression darkening. "So Dobbs is trying to run us both out of town. He succeeded with me. I've already packed." Matthew studied her in the dim lantern light. "And have you made a decision about my offer?" Willow took a deep breath. "Yes. If it still stands, I'd like to go with you." The smile that broke across Matthew's face was like the sun emerging from clouds. "It still stands," he assured her, taking a step closer. "But are you sure? It won't be easy starting over again." "I'm sure. There's nothing left for me here. And the truth is—" She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "The truth is, I want to see where this might lead. Us, I mean." Matthew's smile softened as he reached out to take her hand. "I was hoping you'd say that." For a moment they stood there, hands clasped, the future suddenly opening before them like an uncharted trail. "We should leave tonight," Matthew said, breaking the spell. "If Dobbs is determined enough, he might convince the sheriff to move up his investigation." "Sheriff Taylor came to see me. He all but told me we should be gone by tomorrow afternoon." Matthew nodded. "Good man, Taylor." He glanced around the stable. "My horse is ready to ride. How much have you packed?" "2 trunks. Not much. Just essentials." "We'll need a wagon. I know where we can get one tonight. No questions asked." He squeezed her hand. "Go back home and wait for me. I'll come for you within the hour." As Willow turned to leave, Matthew called after her. "Willow." She looked back. "Yes? I'm glad you're coming with me." The hour that followed was the longest of Willow's life. She returned home and sat beside her packed trunks, alternating between excitement and terror. Was she making another mistake? Or was this the beginning of something wonderful? The sound of a wagon approaching interrupted her thoughts. Looking out, she saw Matthew pulling up outside, driving a small but sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses. His own mount, a handsome buckskin, was tethered to the back. Willow didn't hesitate. Grabbing her cloak and reticule, she opened the door just as Matthew reached it. "Ready?" he asked, eyes searching hers. "Yes." Together, they loaded her trunks into the wagon. Willow took one last look at the small house that had been her home for the past year, then climbed up onto the wagon seat beside Matthew. "No regrets?" he asked quietly as he flicked the reins. "None," Willow replied, and was surprised to find she meant it. They left San Pedro under cover of darkness, taking the northern road out of town. Matthew drove steadily, keeping the horses at a brisk but sustainable pace. As the lights of San Pedro faded behind them, Willow felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Ahead lay uncertainty, a new territory, a new life, and the unknown potential of her relationship with the man beside her. Yet instead of fear, she felt a growing sense of freedom and possibility. "Matthew," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. He responded, glancing over. "Thank you for helping me that day on the boardwalk, for everything since." His smile was visible even in the moonlight. "Best mud I ever stepped in." Willow found herself laughing, the sound carrying into the vast, open night that lay before them. But what neither of them knew was that their troubles were far from over. Behind them in San Pedro, Gerald Dobbs was just discovering their departure, and he was absolutely furious. They traveled through the night and well into the next day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and take hurried meals. Matthew was familiar with the route north, having traveled it before, and knew places where they could stop without drawing undue attention. By the time the sun was high, Monday, when the sheriff would have been starting his investigation, they were already far from San Pedro, the coastal roads giving way to more rugged terrain as they moved inland toward Oregon Territory. That evening they made camp by a small stream, the first proper rest they'd allowed themselves. As Matthew built a fire and prepared a simple meal, Willow found herself watching him, still marveling at the turn her life had taken in just a week's time. "Penny for your thoughts," Matthew said, catching her gaze. "I was just thinking how strange life can be. A week ago, I was a respectable school teacher with a secure position. Now I'm a scandalous woman who's run off with a cowboy she barely knows." Matthew chuckled. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic." "It is dramatic. Exactly the sort of thing I would have warned my female students against." "Regretting your decision?" Matthew asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Willow shook her head. "No, but I am wondering what happens next." Matthew set aside the coffee pot and came to sit beside her on the fallen log she'd chosen as a seat. "Next, we continue north. I know a place in southern Oregon, a small valley with good water and better grazing land, room to raise horses, build a house." He hesitated. "Room to build a life if that's what we want." The casual way he included her in his plans made Willow's heart skip. "And what do we tell people about us?" "The truth," Matthew said simply, "that we're starting fresh." "Together," Willow added, testing the word. "Together," he confirmed, eyes meeting hers. "If that's still what you want." In answer, Willow leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. It was a brief kiss, tentative and sweet, but it carried a promise that made Matthew's eyes darken when she pulled away. "I'll take that as a yes," he said, voice slightly rough. Willow smiled. "It's a yes." The journey north took nearly 2 weeks, a time of discovery for both of them. They talked for hours as the wagon rolled through changing landscapes, about their childhoods, their dreams, the books they'd read, and the places they'd seen. They weathered a sudden rainstorm huddled together beneath a hastily erected canvas. They shared the wonder of a stunning sunset over a mountain range Willow had only read about in geography books. By the time they crossed into Oregon Territory, Willow felt as though she'd known Matthew for years rather than weeks. The initial leap of faith she'd taken in leaving with him had evolved into a deep trust and growing affection that surprised her with its intensity. Matthew's small valley turned out to be more impressive than his modest description suggested, a lush expanse of green nestled between protective hills with a clear stream running through its heart. A few scattered farms dotted the periphery, but the center of the valley remained unclaimed. "It's beautiful," Willow breathed as Matthew halted the wagon on a rise overlooking the land. "The town of Oak Ridge is about 5 miles that way," Matthew said, pointing east. "Small but growing. They've got a general store, a smithy, even a hotel of sorts." He added with a meaningful look, "And no school yet." Willow's eyes widened. "No school. The railroad's planning to extend a line through here next year. Folks are already starting to settle in anticipation. There's at least a dozen children in the area with no formal education." "You planned this," Willow accused, but there was no anger in her voice. Matthew shrugged, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Let's say I did my research before asking you to come with me. I wouldn't have brought you all this way if I didn't think you could find purpose here too." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Willow leaned against his shoulder. "So what now, Mr. Atwood?" "Now," he said, flicking the reins. "We find ourselves a piece of land, build a cabin before winter sets in, and see about starting that school you're already planning in your head." Willow laughed. "And what makes you think I'm planning a school already?" "Because I'm starting to know you, Willow Warren, and I've never met a more dedicated teacher. The first few months in Oregon were challenging, but exhilarating. They purchased a promising tract of land, 40 acres with frontage on the stream, and Matthew immediately set about building a small but sturdy cabin with the help of neighbors eager to welcome newcomers to the area. Willow, meanwhile, quickly established herself in the growing community. When word spread that a trained teacher had arrived from California, parents began approaching her about lessons for their children. By the time the first snow fell, Willow was teaching 15 students in the front room of the Johnsons' farmhouse, a temporary arrangement until a proper schoolhouse could be built in the spring. Their cabin was completed just before the first heavy snowfall, a snug one-room structure with a stone fireplace and sturdy walls that kept out the winter chill. It was simple but comfortable, and as Willow hung curtains at the windows and arranged her books on the shelves Matthew had built, she felt a sense of ownership and belonging she'd never experienced in San Pedro. They had agreed to a somewhat unconventional arrangement. Matthew slept on a bedroll near the fire, giving Willow the single bed they'd managed to acquire. It was a compromise born of mutual respect and the practical reality that while they were committed to building a life together, they were still learning each other's ways. The winter months brought them closer, confined as they were to the small cabin during the worst of the weather. They developed routines and rhythms, discovered each other's strengths and weaknesses, argued occasionally, but always found their way back to harmony. By the time spring arrived, Willow knew she was in love with Matthew Atwood. She suspected he felt the same, though neither had spoken the words aloud. On a mild April evening, as they sat on the porch Matthew had added to the cabin, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and pink, Willow finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you really ask me to come with you that night in San Pedro?" Matthew was silent for a moment, eyes on the distant hills. "The honest truth? Of course. Because from the moment I saw you struggling to stand in that mud, trying to maintain your dignity despite everything, I knew you were different. Strong in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength. Brave in a way that mattered." He turned to look at her. "I didn't plan to stay in San Pedro. Didn't plan to get involved. But then there you were, and suddenly all my plans seemed less important than getting to know the woman who taught school by day and read Shakespeare by lamplight." Willow blinked in surprise. "How did you know I read Shakespeare?" Matthew's smile was sheepish. "I may have watched your house a time or two in the evenings. Saw you through the window reading by the lamp. That's either romantic or concerning. A bit of both, probably. But the point is, I recognized something in you that I'd been looking for without realizing it. And when I saw how that town was treating you, how they were trying to force you into a mold you didn't fit." He shook his head. "I couldn't leave you there. So you rescued me." "No," Matthew corrected her. "You rescued yourself. I just provided transportation." Willow laughed at that, but she knew what he meant. The decision to leave had been hers, born of her own courage and determination. "I'm glad I came with you. These past months have been extraordinary. Willow, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." His voice took on a serious note. Her heart began to race. "Yes. We've been living in this cabin for months now, built a life here together, but there's something missing, something I want to make right." He turned to fully face her, still holding her hand. "I love you, Willow Warren. I think I have since that first day in San Pedro, and if you'll have me, I'd like to make this arrangement of ours permanent. Properly permanent." Willow's breath caught. "Matthew Atwood, are you proposing to me?" "Inelegantly, but yes. Will you marry me, Willow? Be my wife, my partner in whatever comes next." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes as joy welled within her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Matthew's smile was brilliant as he pulled her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. They were married in late May in the newly completed schoolhouse that the community had built for Willow. The entire settlement turned out for the occasion. Farmers and ranchers, shopkeepers from Oak Ridge, even the circuit preacher who had delayed his departure for 2 days to perform the ceremony. Willow wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Matthew had ordered all the way from Portland as a surprise, and carried wildflowers picked from their own land. Matthew, clean-shaven and solemn in a new suit, watched her walk toward him with such undisguised love that several of the women in attendance dabbed at their eyes. "Never seen a man look at a woman quite like that," Mrs. Johnson whispered to her husband. "Like she's the answer to every question he ever had." Their vows were simple but heartfelt, each promising to stand by the other through whatever life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up nearly raised the roof of the new schoolhouse. As Willow and Matthew moved together in their first dance as husband and wife, she couldn't help but think of that other dance in San Pedro that had changed the course of their lives. "What are you smiling about, Mrs. Atwood?" Matthew asked. The name sent a thrill through her. "Mrs. Atwood, I'm still getting used to that. You have a lifetime to practice." "I was thinking about that night in San Pedro, the Founders' Day dance. How differently things might have turned out if you hadn't helped me up from that mud. I'm glad I was there. So am I." Later that night, as they returned to their cabin, now truly their home in every sense, Willow felt a sense of completion she'd never known before. The journey from that muddy street in San Pedro to this moment had been unexpected and sometimes difficult, but she wouldn't have changed a single step. In the years that followed, the small settlement grew into a proper town, spurred by the arrival of the railroad as predicted. The school expanded, eventually requiring Willow to hire an assistant teacher to help with the growing number of students. Matthew's horse breeding business thrived as well. His eye for good stock and fair dealings earned him a reputation that spread throughout the territory, bringing buyers from as far away as San Francisco. They expanded their cabin into a comfortable farmhouse, adding rooms as their needs changed. First, a proper kitchen and dining room, then a study for Willow's books, and finally, in their 3rd year of marriage, a nursery. Their son, James, arrived on a stormy November night, with Mrs. Johnson serving as midwife, and Matthew pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the first cry announced the baby's arrival. "He has your eyes," Willow told Matthew, as he held his son for the first time, awe and terror mingling in his expression. "And your determination," Matthew replied, watching as the tiny hand gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Poor child. With the 2 of us as parents, he'll be the most stubborn person in Oregon Territory." Willow laughed, exhausted but radiantly happy. "I wouldn't have it any other way." 2 years later, their daughter Elizabeth joined the family, followed by another son, William, 3 years after that. Their home rang with children's laughter, occasional tears, and the constant bustle of a growing family. Through it all, Matthew and Willow remained partners in every sense, supporting each other's ambitions, sharing responsibilities, and never forgetting the unlikely circumstances that had brought them together. On their 10th anniversary, Matthew surprised Willow with a trip back to California, not to San Pedro, but to San Francisco, where they spent a week exploring the vibrant city, attending the theater, and enjoying the luxury of time alone together. On their last night there, as they walked along the waterfront watching ships come and go in the busy harbor, Matthew asked, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving your teaching position, coming with me?" Willow looked up at him, this man who had become the center of her world. "Never," she said with absolute certainty. Everything I've built since then, our home, our family, the school in Oak Ridge, it's all been more fulfilling than I could have imagined. Matthew smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Even when I track mud into the house after working with the horses, or when I snore loud enough to wake the children. Even then, Willow laughed, leaning into his embrace. Though I do wish you'd learn to use the boot scraper I placed by the door specifically for that purpose. I'll work on it for the next 10 years. See that you do, Mr. Atwood. I expect improvements by our 20th anniversary. As they returned to their hotel, Willow reflected on how far they'd come from that fateful day when she'd found herself face down in the mud of San Pedro. What had seemed like humiliation had actually been the beginning of everything good in her life. Her marriage, her children, the schools she'd built, the community that had embraced them. Sometimes the worst moments led to the best destinations, and sometimes the right person appearing at exactly the right time could change everything. In the autumn of their 30th year in Oregon, Willow and Matthew sat on the porch of their farmhouse, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Their eldest son, James, had taken over much of the horse breeding business, allowing Matthew to slow down a bit, though he still insisted on working with the special cases, the horses that needed extra patience and understanding. Willow had retired from teaching a few years earlier, handing over the now substantial school to a capable young woman who reminded her a bit of herself at that age. She still volunteered occasionally and served on the school board, unwilling to completely sever her connection to education. "Do you remember when we first saw this valley?" Matthew asked, his hair now silver but his blue eyes as bright as ever. "How empty it was." "I remember," Willow said, looking out at the prosperous town that had grown up around them. Oak Ridge now boasted several streets of businesses, a town hall, 3 churches, and even a small hotel. Their own property remained a peaceful haven on the outskirts, though their children's homes were within easy visiting distance. "Did you ever imagine it would become all this?" Matthew gestured toward the town. "Not specifically, but I knew it would be something special. I could feel it that first day." Matthew took her hand, the gesture as natural after all these years as breathing. "You know what tomorrow is?" Willow smiled. "Of course, 35 years since a muddy boardwalk in San Pedro." "Best mud I ever stepped in," Matthew said, repeating what had become a private joke between them over the decades. "Indeed," Willow agreed, squeezing his hand. "Though I could have done without the public humiliation part." "Ah, but then I wouldn't have had the chance to play the gallant hero." "You've had plenty of other chances since then, like when that bull nearly trampled me in our second year here, or when I fell through the ice on the stream that winter. Those were just maintenance heroics. To keep in practice, the boardwalk was the original and best." Willow laughed, the sound as delighted as it had been when she was younger. At 60, her hair had silvered elegantly, and fine lines marked the corners of her eyes and mouth, lines earned through years of laughter and occasional tears. To Matthew, she was more beautiful now than the day he'd helped her from the mud. "What shall we do to celebrate tomorrow?" she asked. 35 years is quite a milestone. Matthew pretended to consider. "We could push each other into mud for old time's sake." "Absolutely not. These old bones don't recover from falls the way they used to." "Then perhaps a quiet dinner, just the 2 of us." James and Mary offered to take the grandchildren for the night. "That sounds perfect." As twilight deepened into evening, they remained on the porch, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The sound of their grandchildren's laughter mingled with the familiar night sounds of the valley. Crickets chirping, a distant owl, the soft nickering of horses in the paddock. "You think they'll tell our story someday?" Willow asked softly. "Our children, our grandchildren, the tale of the schoolteacher and the cowboy." Matthew smiled. "I imagine they will, It's got all the elements of a good story: villains, heroes, a dramatic escape. And a happy ending, Willow added. The happiest, Matthew agreed, though I don't think it's an ending at all. More like a middle that keeps going. A middle that keeps going, Willow repeated thoughtfully. I like that. As the first stars of evening twinkled overhead, Willow Warren Atwood leaned against her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that their story, begun in mud and adversity, had blossomed into something rare and precious. A love that had withstood the test of time, a partnership that had weathered all seasons, and a family that would carry their legacy forward. Not bad, she thought, for a woman who once found herself face down in the mud of San Pedro with a ruined dress and wounded pride. Not bad at all. If you enjoyed Willow and Matthew's incredible journey from a muddy boardwalk to a lifetime of love, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more amazing historical romance stories. Drop a comment below, telling us which moment moved you most. Was it the dramatic confrontation at the dance, their midnight escape, or that perfect proposal under the Oregon sunset? Hit that notification bell so you never miss another unforgettable tale.